And here we go. Alrighty. So I meant to hit that button. Okay, here we are. Share the screen here. And there we go. So in Exodus 19, as we're traveling through the Bible timeline, we are in the year 1446 BC, which is Middle Bronze Age 2B. China, led by Emperor Ren of their Shang dynasty. Egypt being led by Pharaoh Ibi, something Matra, the name's corrupted. He's of the 13th dynasty in their second intermediate period. They've been pushed further south because they've had foreign invaders come in. The early Hyksos dynasty, the 14th dynasty, foreigners, outsiders, including the Amalekites mixed in with these folks. They're being led by their king, Pharaoh Nubuseri Ya'amu. So Egypt's got two dynasties at the same time, and one in the north, one in the south. Babylon is being led by King Amidatana, great-grandson of Hammurabi. In the line of Christ amongst the Lord's people over here at Mount Sinai, we have Aminadab, I'm thinking about 98 years old, his son Nahshon, about 39 years old, 28th generation of Adam. He is going to be grandpa to Boaz, and he is the leader of the tribe of Judah at this point in time as they are meeting with the Lord here on Mount Sinai. So, meeting here on Mount Sinai, let's do this. Start the slideshow. Let's go to here. And here we are. So here are 2.5 million people at the base of the mountain. Here is Moses going up to the peak, talking with God and bringing word back to the people. And we are getting some information and some thoughts on this from this guy, Joel Richardson, who from his book, From Sinai to Zion, showing the Lord's consistency in his desire to have a people that is a lighthouse to the rest of the world and marriage imagery from the start. So with that, let's pick up in Exodus 19. We've been talking about all the different marriage elements. There was the mitvah, the washing and cleansing before the wedding that the bride undergoes and that they went through here. We're going to pick up talking about the huppah, the canopy that's there for that the bride and the groom to be are under in this engagement. So let's pick up in Exodus 19, verse 18. Now Mount Sinai was all in smoke because the Lord descended upon it in fire, and its smoke ascended like the smoke of a furnace, and the entire mountain quaked violently. When the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder, Moses spoke, and God answered him with thunder. Then the Lord came down on Mount Sinai to the top of the mountain, and the Lord called Moses to the top of the mountain, and Moses went up. So we looked at different scriptures where this imagery is there, and seeing this, that it's mentioned in Deuteronomy 33, verse 2, one verse, we're told this. Deuteronomy 33, 2, Moses looking back on this. 33, verse 2. He said, the Lord came from Sinai and dawned on them from Seir. He shone from Mount Paran, and he came from the midst of myriads of holy ones, showing the Lord being with them throughout the upcoming journey between Mount Sinai and where Moses is giving Deuteronomy to the people. Interesting, in the end of verse 2 there, that in the myriads of holy ones, the Hebrew word for holy ones there, that could very well be the word Kadesh, which is one other destination on their itinerary. So showing 4 steps that the Lord was with them on throughout, starting here at Sinai. This is also mentioned in one verse in Acts chapter 7, verse 53 by Stephen. In his glorious testimony, he says the problem with the religious leaders of his day who had him on trial were basically, he's told them in Acts 7:53, you who received the law as ordained by angels and yet did not keep it. So Father, Son, Spirit, and the hosts of heaven all involved at this meeting with God's people here, this betrothal. This far more than a Western society engagement. This is actually the main marriage right here, and then the completion, the consummation is us coming together, and that will be when the groom takes the bride into the house that's been prepared. Well, we know Jesus says, the Father's going to send me. I don't know the day or the hour myself. Father's going to send me. I'm going to come for my bride, bring you into the house that's been prepared for you. So it's that imagery has been there from the beginning. That whole plan, that whole approach has always been the desire. Continuing here in Exodus, verse 21, then the Lord spoke to Moses, go down, warn the people, so that they do not break through to the Lord to stare, and many of them perish. Also have the priests who approach the Lord consecrate themselves, or else the Lord will break out against them. And Moses said to the Lord, the people cannot come up to Mount Sinai, for you warned us, saying, set boundaries around the mountain and consecrate it. Then the Lord said to him, go down and come up again, you and Aaron with you, but do not let the priests and the people break through to come up to the Lord, or he will break out against them. So Moses went down to the people and told them. So this is a very powerful meeting with God. He's holy and pure, and we are not in a position in our sin-infected state to experience him fully revealed. Even Christ's transfiguration on that mount was a partial revealing. And so even when Moses later on would ask to see the Lord, he says, I'm going to put you in the cleft of the rock here, and you can see my, basically, as I'm passing, there's a very limited view of God that we can see and handle. And so God is keeping this recognition of holiness and purity, and us not being able to be in fully in that presence. But here's this coming together that he's going to make available. And we're going to see too, there is blood of the covenant, as Jesus Christ says, this is my blood of the new covenant, talking to his first church at the Lord's Supper. And so we see that there's very much a ability to come together through this offering, and through this sacrifice, this union is able to happen, all part of this wedding marriage picture. So any reactions, thoughts, questions so far?
Slow that down. That was hot.
Yeah. So basically, this is a wedding. This is a marriage. This is the Eastern culture of betrothal that God is establishing with his people. Yeah.
Last week.
Exactly. Exactly. That's what this is. We're continuing from last week in that vein, that this is what's happening here, and looking how further, as we go through the scriptures here, how this is further playing out, what happened there and how that relates to us today. While we are not, as 21st century Gentiles, we are not and never were under the law of Moses. This Judeo-Christian fellowship and relationship and covenant relationship, we are very much in. The covenant was way bigger than just the law of Moses. And so the covenant is where the law of Moses showed our need for Christ. And again, that offering, because that offering has been made once and for all. So now we, in this new covenant, can enter into this covenant with Christ, be that bride making herself ready for her groom in this covenant relationship, this new covenant, because he has now done that.
For Jesus being the perfect sacrifice, there didn't need to be blood offering.
You're right. And the book of Hebrews does a great job talking about that. So this is, of course, before Jesus Christ in the flesh, and this is 1400 years before Jesus. And so this is God first bringing a people, calling out these slaves from Egypt. You who were not a people are now a people. He called them out. He made them a nation when they weren't a nation before. This new nation of Israel is being birthed here. Now their heritage and lineage, yes, from Adam to Noah to Abraham and on down, yes, now through the 12 tribes of Israel. But this new nation is being established. They're going to be a covenant people. The covenant is going to be lived out in the covenant land, the promised land. This is the agreement before entering into coming to home together. This is the wedding vows. This is the betrothal. This is the signing the deed and the deal, and then going forward from here. And we, as Judeo-Christian New Testament church members, we, through our baptism, likewise enter into a covenant relationship, a marriage relationship, complete with these vows. We are committing to being his people. We want to take on his name. We want to be his bride, and we want to be a light and a witness to the community that this is available for everyone. just as the nation of Israel was to be a light to the Gentiles from day one. God wanted this for everyone from day one and still does today. And it's still available today to anyone and everyone. But just like the opportunity to get married, you have to actually go forward and do it. People in America have the opportunity to enlist in the services, armed forces, but you have to actually do it. You can be a cheerleader for the military, but that doesn't mean you've signed up and got through boot camp and are enlisted. So does that kind of help?
I'll form my thoughts better and think of a way to ask my question better.
Absolutely, absolutely. Please do. So basically, what we're seeing happen here is here at Sinai, God is establishing something that he's not going to completely throw away once Jesus accomplishes what he accomplishes on the cross and his resurrection. He's still going to have a covenant people. It's going to be this new covenant. The new covenant is not being saved. Remember, we had the Passover as a separate event from the Red Sea crossing and the covenant here at Mount Sinai. The Passover is our salvation. The blood of the Lamb is applied and death passes over for us. It's a gift that's handed to us. At that moment, and I love to give the example, at 10:29, I was lost. At 10:30, I called on the Lord to save me. 10:31 forward, I'm saved forever. Done deal. But in that moment of salvation, I haven't done anything further yet. I have opportunity to, but I haven't yet. That moment of salvation, I hate to use the word just, but I have exactly received a gift, and then I have opportunity after that. So the gift and the covenant relationship are two different things. Now, the beautiful thing for many of us and for a lot of people is at that moment of salvation, the desire is there to follow him and serve him. And so that's when he calls and provides a place for that. But the salvation is different from a covenant. There's no agreement at salvation. Salvation is receiving the gift, and then after receiving the gift, we seek and desire that covenant if we so choose. If we don't, it has no bearing on the gift. The gift is a gift.
So, yes, I hung up on the sacrifice thing.
Okay.
So then, and I'm kind of where I'm going is, so why is it then that the Jews need to institute sacrifices on the temple
In the future.
in the future? Why is that a part of the deal?
Great question.
Yeah.
So one of the things that's going to happen in the future as we look to the scriptures and seek spiritual understanding of what we're being told, the temple in Ezekiel, it looks very much to be the temple that is physical, that is built. And if you actually do the math and map it out, the dimensions of the temple described at the end of Ezekiel cannot geographically and logistically fit in Jerusalem right now. It doesn't work. But what are we told is going to happen? When Jesus comes back and sets foot on the Mount of Olives, the topography is going to change. And so I certainly understand the millennial temple, the Ezekiel temple, to be a temple of that millennium. That's going to be a temple in the millennium that is served at. Before that, before Christ comes, it looks to be that the Antichrist is going to enter into a temple and stop the sacrifices that are happening at that time. Well, right now there's no temple in Jerusalem and there are no sacrifices happening. So it looks like if we understand that scripture and take it at face value, and we had a Zoom conference yesterday on this very topic with Brother Rick Howard, pastor at Modesto, leading out. And I made the observation with a lot of question, well, isn't the church the temple? And these different thoughts that are out there. I made this point. I said, when it comes to these end time events, it doesn't matter what the Jews think. It doesn't matter what the Christians think. When it comes to the end times temple, it matters what the Antichrist thinks and the enemy thinks. And from his perspective, and keep in mind, there's a lot of protection. There's a lot of, especially with the jihadists, there's a lot of fear and anxiety and protection and vigilance around the Temple Mount, the Al-Aqsa Mosque there. A lot of things that happened, 9/11, October 7th, were attributed to the temple being threatened, their mosque being threatened. So the idea here is that somehow it seems like, according to scripture, there will be opportunity, and this could very well be when things go down, like they're going to, And then out of the chaos arises a treaty and a covenant. That part of this covenant could be the opportunity for the Jews to build a temple and redo their sacrifices. Now, so there's the sacrifices they had before Jesus came the first time. They're the sacrifices it looks like they're going to be doing in the end times before the Antichrist comes. And then there are sacrifices at the Ezekiel temple. But isn't Christ one and all? So here's the thought on that. The sacrifices from here at Mount Sinai until Christ. These were signs, and remember, what's the point of a sign? To point to something. The sign is never the end goal. We stop and we stare at the sign or we worship the sign, we've missed what the sign is all about. These sacrifices were to point to the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, pointing ahead to him, reminder of him. As it said in Hebrews and other places, without the shedding of blood, there's no remission of sins. Yet, it is impossible for the blood of goats and bulls to atone for sin. These were all picture pointing to that. So Christ came and fulfilled that. The Jews who did not recognize Christ continued on with their sacrifices until that temple was destroyed in the year 70 by Rome. So when the Jews are, as it looks like, able to have a new temple and have sacrifices again in the end times, they're still going to be missing the fact that it was all pointing to Christ. They're thinking they're just reviving what they were doing from the Moses days and what they were doing in the temple until Rome destroyed it. But they're still missing the mark that it's pointing to Christ. So it looks like in the Ezekiel temple with Jesus here, Jesus is going to be right there in front of them. Remember, there's going to be a revival and a return to Jesus amongst the Jewish people. And they're going to see, now we get it. It's kind of connecting the dots. Here I'm doing here. This is pointing to him who's there. There it all is. Now it all makes sense. And so, and even that is going to be temporary. So the point of all the sacrifices in any era is to point to the ultimate sacrifice of Christ. And sadly, too many who have participated in that, and it can happen today. We get caught up in a ritual and forget what the ritual is about and who and what it's pointing to. And so that's the issue there. But from its start, it was always to be pointing to Christ and him being the ultimate sacrifice. That could the only one that could accomplish what all the other sacrifices never could. So all they could do, the best they could do was point to him.
The main of their sacrifices in the Old Testament was obviously obedience and for their acceptance, covering, for God. So they're not, you said they're going to just go back to what they were doing. So there's no acknowledgement of anything in the New Testament. There's going to be no acknowledgement of Christ. They're just picking up where they left off.
You got it.
Thinking that these sacrifices are going to bring forth the Messiah.
Not that they're going to bring
to something,
They, what they're not realizing is they're not even fully realizing, because they missed the whole boat on Messiah being a suffering servant, being an offering. They often equate that it's actually the nation of Israel that's pointing to, and not an individual son of God in the flesh.
That's part of their identity.
Exactly. And so even when it gets renewed, they're going to miss that Jesus is the Messiah that these were all pointing to. So for them, the sacrifice is just the recognition that with these covenants are ratified in blood. It's like signing in blood with these are blood covenants. And so it's that so that's the mindset there. But praise God, we have Zechariah and Paul and others, writing in the scriptures telling us that there's going to be a revival. There's going to be a recognition that Jesus Christ was the one. And so when the Antichrist, breaks the covenant and persecutes them, there's going to be a realization that the Antichrist was not the Messiah. Jesus Christ was all along. And so after all of that rude awakening, there'll be this revival and coming back to Christ and a recognition, that's where this was pointing this whole time.
Because it seems like it was such an important
Yes.
part, and it just kind of struck me.
Yes.
They're doing all this traveling and they're sacrificing and doing all these things that we've talked about how they bring the lamb in,
Yeah. Exactly.
The lamb like a member of the family.
Yes.
Stuff, and I've always equated it to, that's Jesus we're talking about, Jesus on the cross, but then, like I said, it popped into my mind this morning when you were talking about it. I went a different direction, so I didn't mean to derail.
Oh, that's a very important, hugely important direction.
But I thought, wait a second, slow this down a little bit because something occurred to me that didn't before.
That's awesome.
It's going to be instituted again, and how does that tie into what we're studying?
Yep.
And
this very much relates to Wednesday nights.
yeah.
No, I can't thank you enough and I encourage anyone and everyone, even if you feel it's like kind of left field, bring it up, anything you're thinking or questioning or a little fuzzy about. Let's make sure we got clarity on this, because this is God moving in time and space on earth to establish something with his people that he intends. While the law of Moses was temporary, his covenant relationship with his people, he wants for eternity. And he wants us to be a kingdom of priests, a nation of kings and priests under him. He told the apostles at the Lord's Supper, you'll be sitting with me on my throne, ruling and reigning with me. And so the idea here is very much an invitation and a love and a desire, as in a marriage, husband and wife desire for each other, to cross the line, cross over that boundary and that threshold and seal the deal and prioritize being together and having dibs on each other and being first in each other's lives.
So obviously just like, we sing the song, when I see the blood, I will pass over you. So that
quote from scripture,
that blood sacrifice equals the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross.
Yes.
Right.
The blood of Christ that purchased our salvation, that was the substitute, the perfect sacrifice that we could never be. We're sin-infected, damaged goods. Christ was the pure, sinless sacrifice offering substitute in our place. And so too, as we're told in Acts 20, verse 28, Paul proclaims, Jesus Christ purchased the church with his blood. So there's the dowry, if you will. But Christ not only saved us out of hell for those who accept it, but he also is desiring to deliver us into this covenant kingdom bridal relationship. As will be said later in Deuteronomy, the Lord basically says through Moses, I brought you out to bring you in. We had to have that bondage of sin broken so we could make the wedding bonds and vows with him. And so one has to come before the other, always. And that's why we ask for a testimony of salvation before anyone is baptized into the church. You have to be freed from that bond before you can commit to this bond. And so, yes, but the same beautiful, precious blood of Christ accomplishes both. Purchasing, obtaining our salvation and preserving our salvation. Let's not forget that, because we aren't able to keep it. He does. And then purchasing his church bride with his blood. So does that help with all that? Any other reactions or thoughts or questions or haziness, fuzziness?
I'm sure you covered it before.
Oh, this is very, very important to. Yeah, no, I'm so glad it did. Very important, good stuff. So let's add to this. Let's talk about, let me share a thought from Joel Richardson, his book, From Sinai to Zion, showing the consistent pattern here. So let's talk about this canopy that was over, the huppah. So here's a thought he says. Tell me what you think. Yahweh himself had covered the entire mountain with a thick cloud. As we saw previously, when the cloud of the Lord's presence had both led and followed the Israelites across the desert, it was large enough to serve as a canopy that provided shade for the entire company of Israelites. Remember, we're talking 2.5 million people. Now, this great cloud canopy moved and rested over the mountain. I'm pointing to my screen. I should be pointing up there. I'm looking here. You're all looking there. Yeah, you get the idea. So this now cloud covers the mountain. There's also another phrase used here that we might miss in English translations. When it says they stood at the foot of the mountain, a more literal rendering of the Hebrew essentially says they stood under the mountain. Thus, at the foot of the mountain, under the huppah, Yahweh's bride stood before him. That the Lord intended to specifically use the imagery of the huppah here was not lost on later prophets. hold your place in Exodus. I want you to join with me here. Go to Isaiah chapter 4. Isaiah draws from the imagery present at the Sinai covenant and applies it to the Messiah age. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 4. Isaiah chapter 4, let's look at verses 4 and 5. Isaiah 4, verse 4 says this: When the Lord had washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion and purged the blood shed of Jerusalem from her midst by the spirit of judgment and the spirit of burning, then the Lord will create over the entire area of Mount Zion and over her assemblies a cloud by day and smoke and the brightness of a flaming fire by night, for over all the glory will be a canopy. And we can go on to verse 6. There'll be a shelter to give shade from the heat by day, refuge, protection from the storm and the rain. So just as was done here at Mount Sinai will happen at the end as well. And the Lord is providing this covering to be reminiscent of the wedding imagery and the wedding event that is taking place here. So again, the Lord has been amazingly, profoundly consistent throughout all of this. I mean, we know Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever, but we sometimes have such a disconnect between Old and New Testaments. We forget it's the same God. The first church was all Jewish. Jesus was Jewish. We forget all these things that when we read from Romans 11 about the church being grafted into the olive tree, we sometimes think, we almost feel like, okay, we've been grafted into the New Testament churches of Acts in the early first century AD, 2000, we go back 2,000 years. But no, but that church in the first century that Jesus started, and those Gentiles that joined in and everything, they were all grafted in to this as well. This has always been an ingrafting to what Jesus already had as the husband, to his church bride. It's always been the same. It's always been there. It's always been the desire. It's always been the ultimate goal, the ultimate coming together. So any reactions or thoughts on that? Richardson also makes this point: as it was at Mount Sinai, so it will be at Mount Zion when the Messiah is present. As it will be when the Messiah is present, so it was at Mount Sinai. The Lord himself was actually present, having come down in the cloud and the fire. So again, beautiful consistency of the Lord here, illustrating and dramatically physically showing his plan and desire and intention for us in all this wedding imagery. And here's another point Richardson makes that I really appreciate. Think about this. God did not begin, in these words that we read here in Exodus 19, God did not begin in his conversation with them. He did not begin by appealing to his authority as the creator of all things. He reminded them of his tender mercy, his kindness, his proven track record as deliverer, protector, and provider. Husband. The wedding ceremony did not have an officiating priest, as it were. Yahweh himself was speaking from the mountain. The ceremony had begun right here in Exodus chapter 19. And I really appreciate that, because in the law of Moses is often compared with and claimed that it just borrowed from the ancient Near Eastern covenant government items that were happening amongst the nations around them. And far from it. A lot of those covenants begin with the declaration of, okay, here I am, I'm the king of this, king of that. So declaration of their authority, declaration of their power, of their identity, and all that stuff. And as Richardson points out, that's not what God did here. He could have, he would have been right, but that's not what he did. He didn't appeal to his authority, he appealed to his love and his pursuit of the people. I have been your, there's a word I'm blanking out on. I've been courting you. I've been your courter. I've been your suitor. I've been your pursuer. I've been drawing you. I've been the one, as he said, I've been the one here delivering, protecting, and providing, proving and demonstrating my love for you as I'm bringing you here. I want to be your God. I want you to be my people. And I want you to be a lighthouse to the whole world for them to come and have this too. But I'm starting here with someone somewhere. Every time we're brought in, that's to be the start of something more. We've been brought into something that was here before us. We come to something that pre-existed us, but we're brought into something and we are part of an ongoing, just Christ said, I will be building my church. It's an ongoing building. And so ongoing covenant fellowship and relationship. So reactions or thoughts on that? All good? Even Jonathan Cahn mentions this moment in the Josiah Manifesto, recognizing that the element of fire even appears in the giving of the law of Mount Sinai. Again, there's fire, there's that power, there's that purification, that presence, all those different things. So let's see here. So in Exodus chapter 20, we have the 10 Commandments. Now, as I've mentioned before, in an earlier Sunday school series, we have actually read word for word all 5 books of the Law of Moses. I don't count Genesis as Law of Moses because there's no Moses in Genesis, and there's no law from Moses because there was no Moses. But it's blanket referred to as the first 5 books of Moses, the Pentateuch, the Torah. We've gone through those word for word not all that long ago, so I encourage you to refresh those and take a look at those and bring up any questions. I'm going to be not reading word for word all the remaining of the 5 books of Moses here as we go. I'm going to be bringing out some highlights, kind of like what I did with Job, because we'd gone through Job before. And so I'll bring out some highlights, but if anyone comes across any of these verses that stood out to them or they have questions on, I definitely want to provide that for them. So that being said, the 10 Commandments, we'll go ahead and read them because they are classic, but we'll talk about some things here. But again, I'm not going to go through every single word going forward here. Exodus 20, verse 1. Then God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourselves an idol, or any likeness of what is in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the water under the earth. You shall not worship them nor serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, inflicting the punishment of the fathers on the children, on the 3rd and 4th generations of those who hate me, but showing favor to thousands, to those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not leave him unpunished who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. For 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath of the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male slave or your female slave, or your cattle, or your resident who stays with you. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and everything that is in them, and he rested on the 7th day. For that reason, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and mother, so that your days may be prolonged on the land, which the Lord your God gives you. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male slave, or his female slave, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. And let's continue on to verse 21. Good stopping point there. And all the people were watching and hearing the thunder and the lightning flashes, and the sound of the trumpet, and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it all, they trembled and stood at a distance. Then they said to Moses, Speak to us yourself, and we will listen. But do not have God speak to us, or we will die. However, Moses said to the people, Do not be afraid, for God has come in order to test you, and in order that the fear of him may remain with you, so that you will not sin. So the people stood at a distance while Moses approached the thick darkness where God was. So we'll wind down here and, of course, pick up next week, breaking down some things with the 10 Commandments and this meeting. But any reactions, to this declaration of the Ten Commandments and the people's reaction and Moses's response? Any initial reactions, thoughts, questions, any fuzziness or confusion from anyone? All good? All righty. Well, we'll make that our stopping point for now. I encourage you to, over the course of the week, look over Exodus chapter 20, and we will continue our look at that as we go. Oh, right on. Easy to count, right? Good stuff. The Lord's top 10. There we go. All right. So with that, we'll stop recording and we will get ready to go before our Lord in song together.